candidates who are running for district attorney. Welcome and thank you for agreeing to participate in today's forum. We have Todd Leras, Maggie Krell, and Anne-Marie Schubert. Sitting on our expert media panel, we have Nick Miller from SAC News and Review and Roseanne Chamberlain. Thank you. We are now ready to begin. Your opening statement.
Thank you. And thank you to the League for presenting this particular forum and giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Todd Leras. I'm a candidate for district attorney. I think I bring to the table the broadest and most varied range of experience of any candidate in this race. You're going to hear about prosecutorial experience, and for most of the past 20 years, I've served successfully as a state and federal prosecutor. I served in the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office for 13 years, rising through the ranks, achieving many milestones along the way, including being the youngest person ever selected as Prosecutor of the Year by my peers in the DA's office, going to homicides, gangs, prosecuting successfully victim-related crimes, and ending my term there in the DA's office as a supervisor, teaching new lawyers how to try cases or how to handle matters in the criminal justice system. After that, I became a federal prosecutor, which gave me the opportunity to expand my repertoire into the federal system. But even more than my successes in prosecuting murderers, rapists, pedophiles, drug lords, and conducting investigations into very complex matters, one of the things that I have not mentioned up until this point that I think distinguishes me from the other two candidates is that I also served successfully as an assistant public defender representing indigent defendants, and I know what it's like to approach the criminal justice system from the opposite side. I did that successfully in the early 1990s, and I think that experience gives me the capacity to understand what needs to be changed in the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Okay. Maggie.
Good afternoon. My name is Maggie Krell. I'm a Deputy Attorney General, and I'm running for District Attorney. Right now, my day job is still prosecuting criminal cases. I work for the California Department of Justice as the statewide coordinator combating sex trafficking. I'm running for District Attorney for two reasons: vision and leadership. That's what I bring to the table. I've prosecuted cases on a statewide basis for the last 10 years. I started as a deputy district attorney in Stockton and worked my way up. As a deputy attorney general, I've prosecuted gang cases, murder cases, mortgage fraud, and everything in between. And it's that level of leadership that I bring to the table in this race. Sacramento needs to move forward. We need to move in a new direction. We need a district attorney's office that's willing to embrace the community and join and collaborate with law enforcement and community stakeholders when it comes to fighting crime. That's the vision I have for the office, and that's what I bring to the table.
Thank you, Maggie. Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Anne-Marie Schubert, and I'm running for District Attorney because I have dedicated my entire 24-year career to public safety. I am the only candidate with the experience and the consistent commitment to public safety who's qualified to run the District Attorney's office. I alone have the institutional knowledge, a long history of prosecuting the most violent crimes, as well as a long proven record of establishing innovative prosecution as well as prevention programs. I'm proud to have the overwhelming support of law enforcement, prosecutors, retired judges, and crime victims. And I'm proud to be endorsed by Jan Scully, who for 20 years has led the office at such a level that she was the first and only female president of the National District Attorneys Association. Those who support me do so because they believe in me and my leadership abilities. They know me as a trial deputy and a prosecutor of the year who's tried over 100 jury trials, including child abuse, rape, and murder. They know me as a supervisor managing at the most difficult budgetary times, as well as supervising our child abuse unit, making daily decisions that affect people's lives, decisions that demand a maturity of judgment so we can exercise those with fairness and reason. And perhaps most of all, they know me as an individual who's created innovative programs both at catching criminals and preventing crime, like the Cold Case Homicide Unit and our nationally recognized Truancy Intervention Program. I have no doubt that I will continue these programs. But experience alone is not the only reason. My family has been in this community for 50 years, and I'm raising my children here. My experience, dedication, and commitment to Sacramento County demonstrates I'm the most qualified candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our question portion. Roseanne, you can ask Anne Marie first.
All right, thank you. Unlike the City Council, the District Attorney runs a department with important administrative duties, $70 million budget, and about 400 employees. Why are you qualified to do that?
Thank you. Great question. I think it's important to remember that when we're talking about the DA's office, it is a business. My background and my experience of this office demonstrates I'm the most qualified candidate. I've been a supervisor for well over 5 years. In that time period, I supervised the misdemeanor unit, which comprised of about 25 attorneys and a number of support staff. It was the most difficult times that we faced as an office. In that time, I developed efficiencies. We went through and made efficiencies within that unit so we could survive that budget crisis. I've had to deal with personnel grievances. I've had to let people go, and I feel comfortable. I've been through the Supervisor Academy, which was a long academy to develop management skills. So with that, as well as my supervisory experience in the child abuse unit, overseeing one of the most significant units, I'm confident I have that ability.
Thank you. Maggie?
I'll say number one, that as district attorney, I will never let people go while accepting pay raises. But in terms of my experience that qualifies me to oversee such a budget and such a large department is the collaboration and the work that I've done at the Attorney General's office in a statewide department that oversees crime, not just in one county, but all over California. As the coordinator for the Mortgage Fraud Strike Force, I brought together a coalition of not only law enforcement, but also community groups in order to tackle one of California's toughest crises. I've also worked here in Sacramento County on some of these issues, as well as in my spare time serving as a member of the City and County Public Transportation Committee that oversaw and gave input on some important issues affecting bicycle safety in the region. And those experiences, that diversity of experience, not just in the criminal justice system, but in the community, give me an understanding beyond any other candidate in this race to do the work that needs to be done to put our county back on track and move Sacramento forward.
Thank you. Nick, ask the,
Wait.
I'm sorry, Todd.
Thank you. The question, and it is a good one, I agree, is what makes me qualified to be district attorney. I have had the great good fortune to succeed at everything that I've tried in the criminal justice system, whether it's being a defense attorney back in the early 1990s, being a state prosecutor for 13 years from 1995 to 2008, or being a federal prosecutor. I have a varied range of experience, and I just listened to Ms. Schubert talk about what she's done, and everything that she's described doing, I've also had the experience of doing both in the district attorney's office and in other contexts. I understand the criminal justice system not just in the state, but also the federal system, and I understand what resources can be taken from the federal system to help out in tough budget times. And although Jan Scully didn't endorse me, we have political differences. The fact is, she selected me to run the largest and most complex litigation that her office ever undertook, and my turning that around helped provide the source of money that helps save jobs during critical budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Nick, you can direct your question at Maggie.
Sure. I'd like to talk about realignment. And I think for the next DA, and I know having read what you have all written and discussed in the past, this is going to be the most challenging issue for the next DA. So let's look at it. Let's look at what are the threats and what are the opportunities when it comes to operating a DA's office in the world of realignment.
Well, the opportunity from my standpoint is to really consider an offender's first offense as their potential last offense, and we do that by creating a safety net for low-level offenders to get back on track, whether it's mental health courts being expanded, drug courts being expanded, but increasing the amount of community-oriented solutions for offenders beyond just incarceration, because our incarceration-first approach that we've had in this county for the last 20 years has done nothing more than overpopulate our prisons. It hasn't made us safer, and it hasn't helped us move our offenders onto the right track. So I see realignment as an opportunity to do a better job with low-level offenders. I also think that we need to make sure we target the most violent offenders and make them a priority, and make sure that we continue to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law, and make sure that we enforce those sentences.
Thank you. Todd.
I also embrace realignment, and for many of the same reasons as Ms. Krell. My approach, however, is to acknowledge that we don't have the answers. I do know one thing from having had the experience of approaching the criminal justice system from both sides, and that is how to prioritize. That means to recognize that the worst offenders, the rapists, the murderers, the pedophiles, the people who victimize others, are the ones who deserve our attention and deserve the rare bed space that's now so precious after the federal courts have ordered that the prison population be reduced. That's what we're dealing with. So now, instead of looking to incarceration first, we have to look for other alternatives. And the one thing that I am prepared to do and want to do as district attorney is make new priorities so that first offenders and low-level offenders and drug offenders are treated appropriately. And realignment provides us with the best opportunity to change things so that we get at the underlying roots of cause to improve public safety.
Thank you, Todd. Anne Marie?
I do agree with you, Nick, that there are both threats and opportunities with the current existing realignment, and I think it's important to talk about, first of all, the threats, because as the next district attorney, the most overwhelming thing and concern should be public safety. My concern are the threats is when people call people individuals that are low-level offenders that are truly not. For instance, David Lee running around Folsom Lake College armed with a loaded weapon and a plan to kill more than Virginia Tech, in my opinion, is not a low-level offender, but the legislature has decided that is. People that are on paroled sex offenders and gang members that are out in our community now being supervised locally, in my opinion, as a parent and a prosecutor, are not low-level offenders. I do believe there's good things, but I agree with the recent Stanford study that came out in November of 2013 that suggested significant reforms to realignment. Those things include capping the county jail sentences, and I think that's important. We can then provide those opportunities, which really does get to the root of it, of let's treating those truly low-level offenders with the services that they need. But let's protect the community first.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Roseanne, if you'll direct your next question to Todd.
Good. Jan Scully was the district attorney for a good 20 years. We're going to have a new district attorney soon. Could you discuss what areas of policy and practice you would be interested in changing if you become the new DA?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. And that's exactly why we're here, is to talk about those policies. I think that the district attorney's office, since I worked there for most of Jan Scully's term, for 13 of those 20 years, the district attorney's office has focused appropriately on serious offenders, and I don't think that anything is going to change with my administration in terms of focusing on those serious offenders. I take issue with what Ms. Schubert just said about the individual Folsom Lake College. I would treat that also as a serious offender or a person who is bent on crime. But one thing that I can bring to the table is a willingness to share jurisdiction. And I know, after being a federal prosecutor, that a firearm offense like that is one that might be appropriately dealt with under Title 18 of the United States Code. And I would call upon my sources and knowledge of federal law to address people who don't need to be treated as low-level offenders and can be treated in the federal system, and then concentrate on trying to reduce crime for the low-level offenders through realignment policies.
Thank you, Todd. Maggie?
As the only candidate in this race that hasn't spent a majority of my career in the rigid confines of 901 G Street at the district attorney's office, who has prosecuted cases on a statewide basis all over California, and as a prosecutor who's cross-designated as a special assistant United States attorney currently, what I see for the office is a new direction, a new vision moving forward, and that would be intervention with youth crimes, early intervention, more work at the front end to make sure that we prevent crime, to be smarter on prevention, to be more in touch, in tune with the community, to embrace community partnerships, and so that we can work together, not just the DA's office in a silo, but really work together with law enforcement in the community to address our crime problems as a team, to make sure that realignment works by ensuring that low-level offenders have the resources they need, both the carrot and the stick that they need in the community to get back on track and stay on track.
Thank you. Anne Marie?
Thank you. I think it's important to first recognize that our office, contrary to Ms. Krell's opinion, is not in incarceration only. We've established long-term programs to divert individuals through things like mental health court and veterans court and reentry court and things of those nature. But I will say this, I'm not Jan Scully. I didn't get to the place in my career by not having developed my own programs, and I've mentioned some of those already. But I believe yes, I agree with Mr. Leras that we're always going to prosecute violent crimes. I'm always going to be the one that opposes realignment when it comes to releasing violent felons early, because that's as it exists today. But I believe in three things that I want to expand: programs in the community and the schools, such as things as providing teachers and parents with education on cyberspace security threats. I want to do things with the court system and expand some of our alternative programs already. And I want to have some things that we do in our office alone, such as a sexual exploitation unit, and expanding our public integrity unit, and combining units so that we can have a family violence unit. So that's what I want to do.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Nick, if you'll direct your next question to Anne Marie.
Sure. This is a two-part question. The DA's office budget was not immune to cuts during the recession, like the rest of the local governments region-wide. What would you reinstate that has been cut? And then two, what policy would you like to tweak or bring back that disappeared in recent years?
I would agree with you that our office, just a little bit of background, in the last 5 years, we've had 20% cuts from the general fund. Within that, we've seen cuts to our attorney staff, our investigative staff, our crime laboratory staff, our victim advocate staff. And as a result of that, we've seen some units that have been reduced or eliminated. As a priority for me, some of the things, we clearly have not cut things like the prosecution of violent crimes. But as the next district attorney, I would like to reinstate things as our community prosecution program, which is a great program within the community. We currently have 2 out of 5. We used to have 5. It's a fantastic program for addressing quality of life crimes. That's one of the things. And then the second question was, what practices or policies would you like to see reinstated? A full enforcement of our officer-involved shootings is one of those, not just enforcement or fully reinstating it, but now engaging our crime laboratory and bringing back our investigators, so that, because I believe in transparency and clarity of purpose, and I think that's important for the public.
Thank you. Maggie?
Yes, as district attorney, I will take a top-to-bottom review of the entire district attorney's office to make sure not only that we're running as efficiently as possible, but to also ensure that we're following the best practices from all over the state and all over the country. I think that's necessary after 20 years of the same regime. In terms of specific units that I want to see brought back or brought to the district attorney's office, it's critical that we have a public integrity unit. I see that as 3 prongs. One prong would be the officer-involved shooting review. Another prong would be government accountability and the kind of corruption that we've seen lately with the Capitol right here in our own jurisdiction in Sacramento. And the third would be conviction integrity. I also think it's critical that we protect the most vulnerable girls and young women in our society, and those are our human trafficking victims. Human trafficking has been on the rise in Sacramento, and the district attorney's job has to be more than just prosecute the cases, but also look for and identify at-risk kids to protect them from traffickers and pimps on our streets.
Thank you. Todd?
I think it's a tremendous advantage for both Ms. Schubert and I to have served time in the district attorney's office, and I take issue with Ms. Krell somehow treating that as if it's a bad thing. You have to have been there during the better times to know exactly what it was that was cut during the tough times. And I was there at the beginning of the tough times, and I was there during the good times, and I know what had occurred. I'm proud of the district attorney's office. I just thought that it should be headed in a different direction, and that's why I'm in this race. I would also restore officer-involved shooting investigations fully. I think that's important, but I've also pledged that officer-involved shootings are going to be investigated from a neutral standpoint. Right now, the one complaint I hear over and over again from the communities I visit is that the district attorney's office seems to approach them as if it's already deciding it has to justify the shooting. In addition, I would also prosecute political corruption cases, such as the one involving Dr. Richard Pan that was in the B. That if you have someone who has done something like Rod Wright, that should be prosecuted here.
Thank you. Roseanne, if you'll direct your next question to Maggie.
There's a growing emphasis on rehabilitation over incarceration. What do you see as the best ways to reduce recidivism? And what would your priorities be, specifically treatment programs or other programs that would be available to do that?
I agree that rehabilitating offenders is extremely important, because recidivism is when the same criminals commit the same crimes over and over again and slip into that cycle of violence where they end up doing 25 to life. And obviously taxpayers can't afford that approach anymore. So I see rehabilitation as the answer to that. It certainly comes up in the context of drug cases, but can also come up in other cases. I support community-based programs. I support the probation officers and helping them work with these criminals that are outside in our communities to help them get back on track by frequent drug tests, by helping them find employment, by making sure they come up, they attend their jobs if they have jobs, by giving them the safety net that they need in the community to truly get them back on track. I've seen programs like this work in other counties. Back on Track started in San Francisco in 2006, but over the last 10 years, counties from Los Angeles to San Diego to Santa Clara to Contra Costa have introduced very innovative different programs that have really had good results in reducing recidivism. So I definitely think that we can do that here in Sacramento as well, and as district attorney, that would be one of the first things that I would do.
Thank you. Todd?
Recidivism is a genuinely important issue, and it's probably one of the most important issues. We have a failure rate that has been too far and for far too long. Essentially, our approach for the last 20 years has been to place the onus on the offender. The advantage I have, having been on both sides of the criminal justice system, is I'm the only person at this table who sat on the other side of a person who's been a drug abuser and committed property crimes to feed their habit, and ask them, why are you doing this? What's going on with your life? And getting honest answers to that. And I think that's an extremely important thing to have, because we've had a model that has essentially said, if you don't do certain things that we want you to avoid, we're going to toss you back in custody. That's the probation model. I would like to see a model that encourages people to do things we know reduce crime, like get a job, finish their education, get into a job training program, and we provide incentives and rewards in the probationary conditions for those kinds of positive behaviors.
Thank you. Anne Marie?
I think there's two parts to the answer to that question on how can we effectively reduce recidivism. One is establishing and continuing what we have as collaborative courts. For instance, when I ran misdemeanors, we have probably one of the highest rates of alternative sentencing in the state. And when I was running that unit, I specifically expanded the list of cases that we would make sure that we gave alternative sentence. In the time that I ran misdemeanors, we reduced recidivism from 22% to 6%. That's a good example. We also have mental health court, which I also oversaw that, and I agree with that, and I think we can expand that. We have Veterans Court. Those are the types of things. But we have another part of that, which is equally important component, which is early intervention programs. So if we can get out of their community and address these things on the front end, it's critical when we're dealing with juvenile justice issues that we get into the schools at a much earlier phase than we historically have. So things like gang intervention, drug intervention, gun violence types of programs, so that we can, in fact, effectively reduce crime before it ever occurs.
Thank you. Okay, Nick, if you'll address your next question to Todd.
Sure. We see a lot recently in the news, gang violence, shootings at Arden Fair Mall, Mack Road versus South Sacramento. What's working? What's not working? What would you do differently as a DA?
I served in the gang unit in the district attorney's office before I left, so I'm quite familiar with the problem of gang violence, and particularly as it affects certain communities in the Sacramento area. It continues to be a problem. As a federal prosecutor, one of the things that I had the opportunity to do and the privilege to do was head task forces, specifically trying to address the problem of gang violence in the South Sacramento area. We had put together a task force that included the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and Sacramento Police Department in an effort to take a proactive approach towards reducing gang violence. We did not get cooperation from the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office. If I were the district attorney, that effort would be fully embraced. If a state prosecution makes sense for a violent gang member, it would occur there. But if a federal prosecution makes sense and you could get more bang for your buck by taking the case federally, it would go there. And that's how I would address that underlying problem of gang violence.
Thank you. Maggie?
As a prosecutor, I've also prosecuted my fair share of gangbangers in my day, and it's It's a difficult problem, it's a terrible problem, and it's something that we need to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law when it comes to adult criminals that are gangbangers, that are recruiting juveniles and going around with guns in certain areas that are the most impacted in Sacramento. We need to go after them aggressively, and we need to make sure that we pursue long sentence for these gangsters. At the same time, we also need to work with schools to identify at-risk kids who are at risk of slipping into the gang lifestyle and trying to help these kids on the front end so that we don't hand them down a 25-year life sentence on the back end.
Thank you, Maggie. Anne Marie?
I would agree that the two most important components of addressing gang problems is aggressive prosecution. We have a very significant gang unit within our office, and we constantly get state prison sentences for individuals. They're very, very significant long-term commitments for individuals that use guns in our community, and they're doing it for the benefit of a gang. The second half of that component, again, is early intervention, which I propose and I absolutely agree with. Things like going into the schools and bringing in gang detectives and judges and DAs and public defenders to address the youth in our community, no longer at the high school level, but at the early ages, so that they understand not only the true impacts of killing individuals in our community, but what can happen to them if they, in fact, are prosecuted for those types of crimes.
Thank you. We'll now enter into our 1-minute closing statements. Todd, if you'll begin.
Thank you. As I said at the beginning, I have the broadest and deepest range of experience of any of the candidates up here. I've served successfully as a state, federal prosecutor, and in addition, as a criminal defense attorney early in my career. I've seen the criminal justice system from both sides. I want to change the direction of the district attorney's office in the future to reflect current situation, which is the public has grown tired of an incarceration-first mentality as to all offenders except for the most serious offenders. And it's time to prioritize in the district attorney's office so that we pay attention to making sure that rare prison bed space is reserved for the worst offenders, and that we try and experiment with new approaches for low-level drug offenders and first-time offenders to ensure that we try to get at the underlying root causes of crime, that for once we try to increase public safety by trying to prevent crime at the low levels, not just incarcerate. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Maggie?
Thank you. I said at the beginning that this race to me is about vision and leadership. My answers speak for themselves. As the only prosecutor up there that has prosecuted cases on a statewide basis, as a Deputy Attorney General, also on a local basis, starting my career as a Deputy District Attorney in San Joaquin County, and also federally as a cross-designated Special Assistant United States Attorney, I have the experience and I have the leadership. I've led on issues of statewide significance, like mortgage fraud and human trafficking. And I also have the vision to move our county forward when it comes to addressing tough issues like juvenile crime and low-level crime and offenders that seem to keep slipping into the cycle of violence. I look forward to continuing my relationships with the community, to collaborating with community groups and stakeholders to make sure that we're all working together to move Sacramento forward. I'm the only candidate up here that wants to truly move Sacramento in a new direction and reform the office by taking the best practices from all around the state and all around the country and bringing them home. I'd be honored to have your vote.
Thank you. Anne Marie?
Thank you. I've spent the last 24 years as a prosecutor. As I say often, if I won the lottery today, I would show up tomorrow. It's that much how much I love this job. And it's my passion, my dedication, my persistence, and above all, my experience that has earned my reputation. My reputation with law enforcement, crime victims, child advocates, community leaders, as well as judges and attorneys. I've earned that reputation because I practice, quite simply, what I preach, which is prosecution, prevention, and innovation. And above all, I have done it with fairness and integrity. Sacramento's next district attorney must have demonstrated leadership abilities, extensive trial experience, management experience, development of innovative programs, both prosecution as well as prevention, and the ability to collaborate with others. Just last weekend when the Sacramento Bee endorsed me, they made it very clear that running the district attorney's office is not an academic exercise. Experience matters. That's what I have, and that's why I ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This concludes our panel today. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County and the Sacramento Metropolitan Cable